Russia and China spying in the Arctic. Canada sounds alarm. Kremlin turns to China. Russia sells yuan bonds to cover war spending. Here's the latest, so you will be in focus. Subscribe and stay tuned. Canada warns of growing Russian and Chinese spying in the Arctic, says The Guardian. Canadian Security and Intelligence Service reports targeting both government and private sectors blocked attempts by Russia to acquire Canadian tech for use in Ukraine and Chinese efforts to recruit Canadians. Iran also poses threats to dissidents, the agency says. And Canada has expanded its sanctions list. Among other targets, 100 more ships from Russia's Shadow Fleet have been included, the Canadian Foreign Minister announced. Ottawa will continue to support Kyiv and is ready to impose new restrictions in coordination with partners, assured Anita Adent. The Canadian sanctions also target 13 individuals and 11 organizations involved in Russia's drone program, as well as several companies engaged in liquefied gas. For the first time, Canada has imposed restrictions on organizations that provide cyber infrastructure for Russia's hybrid attacks on Ukraine. Details will be reported by my colleague.
A record volume of oil has accumulated in tankers worldwide. Nearly 1 billion barrels are idle. Since late August, the figure has risen by about 40%. Almost all of this oil comes from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. The combination of Western sanctions and effective strikes by Ukraine's defense forces on Russian refineries has caused a systemic crisis in Russia. There is literally nowhere to refine the raw material domestically, and no one to sell it to.
It's likely that some crude is being diverted to export terminals as a result of Ukrainian attacks on Moscow's oil infrastructure, particularly refineries. An unprecedented Western clampdown on buyers of Russian barrels, meanwhile, is stopping some cargoes from discharging, with Indian refineries notably refraining from taking cargoes in signs that China might not be willing to pick up the slack U.S. sanctions on Russia's two largest oil producers, Rosneft (PJSC) and Lukoil (PJSC), have made trading their oil even more difficult, from a publication by Bloomberg.
Drones regularly strike the Federation's largest refineries. The facilities simply cannot keep up with repairs. One example is the plant in Orsk, Orenburg region. Since early October, it has been hit twice. It is known that the plant has suspended operations at least until the end of the week.
The nominal capacity of Orsnefteorg-Zintez oil refinery is 5.76 million tons of oil raw material per year. The plant supplies over 40% of the regional market for light petroleum products and delivers to neighboring regions. According to Reuters sources, in recent months the plant operated at about 13,000 tons per day, so the downtime will result in about 70,000 tons of lost primary refining capacity, from a publication by the Moscow Times.
In October, tax revenues from oil sales in the Federation fell by nearly a quarter year-on-year. As of late September 2025, due to drone strikes, Russia's oil industry was losing up to $65 million daily, according to U.S. experts. And based on official statements from Ukraine's military political leadership, Kyiv has no plans to stop and is expanding the geography of strikes.
This year, for the first time since the war began, a noticeable decline in Russian oil production and refining is recorded. Oil and gas revenues to the Russian budget are shrinking, and by the end of this year, Russia will lose at least $37 billion in budgetary oil and gas revenues. Russian oil companies and the energy sector as a whole are losing tens of billions more. All this limits the Russian war machine. Both regular sanctions against Russia and Ukraine's long-range sanctions are working effectively. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Meanwhile, Washington reported that the United States has nearly exhausted its options for new sanctions against Russia. The plan is to work on compliance with existing restrictions together with Europe.
Well, there's not a lot left to sanction from our part. I mean, we hit their major oil companies, which is what everybody's been asking for. Obviously, those have to be implemented, and it'll take some time to begin to feel it. But, I mean, I don't know what more there is to do. I mean, we're running out of things to sanction in that regard.
Europe intends to intensify sanction pressure on the aggressor in the energy sector. Under threat is not only Russian oil exports, but also liquefied natural gas. Germany's Ministry of Economy reported legal grounds to terminate a contract with one of Gazprom's subsidiaries. The ministry cites the Repower EU plan to reduce dependence on Russian energy carriers and the latest sanctions package against Moscow, reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
For the first time, Russia will sell domestic bonds in Chinese yuan to help cover a record budget deficit. Starting in December, the Finance Ministry will accept bids from investors for two types of bonds with terms of 3 to 7 years. Each bond is worth 10,000 yuan. The government hopes to raise more money as war costs rise and oil export revenues fall. Larissa Petruk will report on where and how the Kremlin is getting these funds.
In Russia, there is a severe shortage of labor. The State Duma has even proposed involving sick Russians in work. For this, they want to supplement the labor code with a new article. This measure has been called the Temporary Adaptive Regime. Transitioning to it will be voluntary compulsory. Employees are allegedly going to be offered to perform their duties while sick. The explanatory note to the bill states that many workers, when suffering from mild illnesses, can work quite effectively.
The acute labor shortage, which arose in Russia against the backdrop of the full-scale war in Ukraine, continues to intensify. According to Rosstat data, the unemployment rate in August was 2.1%, which became a new historical record. At the same time, there were 1.8 million job applications in employment services. The head of the central bank allowed that the tension in the labor market may not decrease for a long time, and may even increase. Against this background, Russian authorities are looking for ways to replenish the workforce. They are attracting labor migrants from abroad, simplifying the employment of children from the age of 14, and also starting to index pensions for working pensioners. From the Moscow Times publication.
Most of the management in Russia is ready to ask employees to perform work tasks remotely while on official sick leave. Only 1 in 5 managers completely excludes this practice. Paradoxically, against the backdrop of a labor shortage, 2/3 of Russian companies are planning to cut salaries and introduce part-time employment in the next 2026 year. 1/3 of businesses are ready to cut expenses on employee training and business trips.
In Russian industry, which is facing a decline in some sectors, a labor shortage nonetheless remains. It amounts to 2 million workers, with a total employed population of 74.5 million people. In April, the head of the Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation reported that the shortage of personnel in Russian manufacturing industry enterprises was 1.9 million workers. Only about 500,000 of them are specialists with higher education. The rest are ordinary workers, he noted. From the Moscow Times publication.
80% of Russian industry is in recession. This is mentioned in one of the latest reports by the Institute of National Economic Forecasting of the Russian Academy of Sciences. As of the end of September 2025, the overall growth of industrial production in the Federation was only 0.3%, which is 19 times less than the previous year. The civil sectors, which were supposed to provide the notorious import substitution, were hit the hardest. Production of clothing, shoes, furniture, food products, televisions, refrigerators, and washing machines is declining. From January to September 2025, car production in the Federation fell by 20%. This is a record low for the Russian automotive industry since 2022, as acknowledged by Rosstat.
The share of Chinese cars in sales increased from 9% in 2021 to 60% in 2024. By the end of the first 9 months of 2025, 7 out of 10 sales leaders were Chinese brands. In 2024, over 1 million cars were imported from China into Russia, which caused an imbalance. Warehouses became overcrowded, production decreased again, and sales fell. As a result, the actual share of cars produced in Russia continued to decrease, contrary to the recently updated goals of the National Automotive Development Strategy from the Insider publication.
The metallurgical industry is also in deep crisis. Among the reasons are the loss of foreign markets, Western sanctions, and the economic downturn.
A 14% decline in production this year is expected by the Russian Steel Association. For those for whom this is just words, I want to say that this is incredibly significant, as it is almost 1/6 of the production. Remember, as the head of Severstal Shevelev said, we will have to close plants if production falls by such an extent. It may seem that only a 15% drop in production occurs, but it is unrealistic to maintain the entire infrastructure. It's clear that we're facing the prospect of closing down metallurgical plants.
The war has so drained the federal budget that the Kremlin has to sacrifice what Russia is willing to spend its last on, the capabilities of the military-industrial complex. The growth of military production is decreasing by an average of 10 to 15% each month, says the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
What's your take on all this? Share your thoughts below. This is UATV. Stay sharp, in focus, and stay safe.